Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd on a bad hair day. Today talking about Babylon 5, and this is one of those episodes that where not a lot really happens in the grand scheme of things. I mean, there's a abduction of Delenn, and we know from the very beginning that she's going to be rescued. And we know that the people who have abducted her are going to be dealt with. That's all on the surface and pretty much a done deal. However, what this episode is trying to tell us is that while last week's show was very dramatic in that Earth was not successful in taking over Babylon 5, that they were able to run away the Earth Force ships and get rid of the Night Watch, some of the Night Watch remained, and some of the real psycho members of the Night Watch remained, and that presented a problem for the main crew. Sheridan is still saying that he does not want to wear the Earth Force uniform anymore because of what Earth has done, and that he'll only put it on after things have settled down. And what this episode tells us is that things aren't settling down. They weren't completely through with the Night Watch. There's still some people there, and even after this episode, it's quite possible that there's still people that they can't trust that are aboard the station. Secondly, the possibility of ever going back to the way things were is probably very remote. And what's coming up, as we all know, is the War with the Shadows. It's mentioned in the opening credits all this season that this was the year of the Shadow War, which is to say that they're going to have bigger fish to fry than dealing with EarthGov. So what we're seeing is a situation to where they're having to reevaluate themselves and find where they fit in this new order, essentially. And Delenn intends to facilitate that through another one of the Minbari religious observances in which she invites all the senior staff to partake in. And how it ends up is how it sets the tone for future stories. Beyond that, a few funny things of Garibaldi having to restart the computer system so that EarthGov doesn't get access to their passwords and shut them down and make sure that their passwords won't work on it anymore. And it brings in an experimental part of the computer system that had been shut down long ago. And Garibaldi is taking it upon himself to try to get this all right. And it adds for some comic relief there. Also, we have a situation where Londo is trying to stop Lord Rifa from making the same mistake he did with Mr. Morden, and has a very unique way of making him see his point of view. We find out that Marcus has been, of course, trained to fight on Minbar and has been able to pretty much take on an entire room full of people. And when there's nobody left standing but Lanier, Lanier picks him up by his collar and very much indicates that while he might be able to defeat everybody else in the room, Lanier would be a whole different thing, in which he says to him, "We may look like your people, but we're not one of you." And making it very clear that he could pretty much clean out his clock if he cared to. And so that's something that we learn about the Minbari, that they're actually quite strong people, despite being very spiritual. They know how to end a fight in their favor if they choose to do so. So that's an interesting thing to put there. Now, of course, we know that they were quite warriors from the history that's presented from the very first episode, in which they had a war with the Earth in which they were overwhelmingly winning, but then stopped for some unknown reason. And with that, we find that the Minbari themselves are nobody to be trifled with. Their reasoning for stopping the war had nothing to do with being anywhere near losing it, and their reasoning for doing what they're doing now is one of much more important than the petty activities of EarthGov. So that's what we see in this episode. And like I said, there's a good bit of action. There's some things that are supposed to bring in suspense, but don't, because, I mean, you're not going to kill off one of the main characters in just a middle of the season series, in the middle of the season show. So what we have here is kind of a transitional episode. It's important in that it shows the command structure of Babylon 5 going forward, and for that purpose, it's quite good. We also see a situation where Londo is having a bit more wisdom than we've given him credit for up to this point. He certainly regrets his involvement with Morden and wants to keep anybody else from having to regret it as well. So that's what we got on this episode of Babylon 5. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow with more reviews with, of course, Deep Space Nine, and we hope you'll be here for that. And once we get some other paperwork things taken care of, we are thinking about a movie. I'm thinking about talking about the reboot Star Trek film, especially since it creates a completely unique origin story for our main characters, which could not have happened in the original series the way it comes out here, but a very enjoyable film, and we'll talk about that perhaps this week, perhaps next. But stay tuned, and we'll let you know when that comes along. So until then, don't go far.